It's at 9 o'clock. Okay. We ready? All right. Let's see. All right. Welcome, everybody, to at today's meeting of October 10th, 2024. We have several items on the agenda. One of the most important items here is item number 5. Mr. Gary Esslinger, EBID Treasurer and Manager, is here, and I thank you very much. So we'll go to item number 1. Roll call of officers, please.
Commissioner Uranga,
Here.
Commissioner Zargis,
Here.
Commissioner Lear,
Here.
Commissioner Jimenez,
Present.
Commissioner Fisher, Vice Chair Zerniak,
Here.
Chair Acosta.
Present. All right. Item number 2, approval or changes to the agenda. Commissioners?
Move the agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor and it's second. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion. All those in favor say, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Item number 3, approval of the minutes of meeting September the 26th, 2024.
I'll move that we approve the minutes from the September 26, 2024 meeting.
I second.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? The ayes have it. Old business, Janine. No old business, Mr. Chair. All right, thank you very much. And Sean, thank you very much for being here. And our fire marshal as well. By the way, you're doing a good job over there. All right. Item number 5, new business. Mr. Esslinger is the EBID Treasurer and Manager, and he has a presentation for us. And like he asked me today, this morning, he says, how much time do I have? I said, take all the time you want. And he and I go back a long way, so it's really a pleasure to see you. We're still alive and kicking, you know, that's pretty good. All right, just step forward and let us know. There's a lot of questions, and I hope that we have some answers. So.
Is this move forward? Usually just use the. Okay. The advance right here? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Costa, and thank you, Board of P&Z. This is actually the first time I ever spoke to y'all. And I'm very honored and pleased to be here. Yes, and thank you, Janie, for allowing me to come here. She invited me, and I have 21 days left, and I will retire as a manager of irrigation district. I've been with the district 47 years, so it's been a good journey. I know where there's a lot of skeletons, and I know where there's a lot of diamonds. And hopefully this presentation today will just give you a general basic idea of how EBID even came to be. And there's a lot of history here that goes way back, even before Mel, that I want to share with you because it brings the issues that were 100 years ago going on that we're still continuing to deal with today. They just don't go away. And so with that, let me try to begin this this presentation. And there's a lot of detail in a lot of these slides, but I'll try to do my best to get through a slide, and then maybe you can ask questions at the end. This engineer here that's staring at that bridge across the rivers. He was probably the first engineer that was thinking about building a dam. This is you can see the elephant view behind, and certainly this is how far back the project begins. But prior to the history of the dam being built, you have to look back to Don Juan Oñate, those people that came through here in the 1500s. And it wasn't shortly after that that the Spaniards started settling out, and they developed acequias, ways to take water off the river and divert it into their communities. And so that tradition is still here. And certainly the Treaty of Hidalgo, Guadalupe Hidalgo, held that to the standards that we have today. We still have community ditch associations here. And the canal that's just behind this building is one of those first acequias. It's the Mesilla acequia. And so traditions, culture, history, it began way back. But if you notice between the 1800s and the 1901, there's three things that happened. There was controversies over water shortages. This one was between Mexico and the United States. We're still having controversies over shortages today. We also had torrential floods. In fact, the river in its state back there actually ran right around where the winery is, just here in Mesilla. You can even see the riverbank by Las Combs. So it was going to the east side of Mesilla at one point. And then a flood in the 1890s took it back to the west of Mesilla. That's why Cruces grew faster than Mesilla, old Mesilla, because they could put the railroad through Las Cruces then, and the river was over here to the west. Interesting history. And then the other thing is serious droughts. We're in one now. So history has a tendency to repeat itself. And I believe that. I'm optimistic. And I'll show you later on a slide where I believe we're going to see wet years again. People will challenge me on it, but I believe history has a tendency to repeat itself. So moving on, lots of things happen in those early years. And one of the most important things to think about right now is after those settlers came into this valley, there was 40,000 acres of irrigated land here before a dam was built. And most of that 40,000 acres was between El Paso and Las Cruces in Doña. I'll take it at that high up. So there was quite a bit of agriculture being done. And that agricultural initiative drew a lot of attention, especially after the railroad came in. And so a lot of people from the east started moving here to the west, seeking a different lifestyle, maybe expanding their farms that they had maybe back east. So with that said, we'll go to what happened next. Well,
Gary, let me interrupt you for a second.
Yes.
And if there's some issues that are under litigation, just let us know that you can discuss that, all right?
I
Feel free
will.
to do that, all right?
I will. If you ask a question, I'll try to respond as best I can and then say I can't. But basically what you're seeing here is just history, and it's all documented. It's part of the legal arguments that have been raised in Supreme Court. But you have to understand, when that issue was raised by the Mexican government that they were not getting their fair share of the water, it ignited an international incident and created a U.S. Supreme Court action. We're in the same U.S. Supreme Court action today. Different topic, but similar. And what happened was the United States government had to step in to try to settle that issue. And so in 1902, the Reclamation Act was passed into law. Construction was approved for the Elephant Butte Dam in 1906. At the same time, there was a treaty with Mexico signed where we promised to deliver in perpetuity 60,000 acre-feet of water to them thereafter. They had about 20,000 acres of farmland in Mexico, in the Juarez Valley. And when you multiply that times 3 acre-feet, which was a normal amount of water per acre, 3 times 20,000, you get to 60,000. And that's the acre-feet of water they got. And we still have to deliver it to them on top of what we delivered to the United States. So that was a huge issue. 1907, the New Mexico State Water Code was adopted, and in 1912, New Mexico State Constitution confirms existing water rights. 1916 was when EBID, the Elephant Butte Dam, was completed. And in 1918, that's when Elephant Butte Irrigation District took over from what was called the Elephant Butte Water Users Association, just a group of farmers who associated themselves. What was their purpose? To collect the assessment to pay for the dam. I'll say it right now. The farmers in this valley paid for the dam. All of its appurtenances, all of its drains and canals. No one else paid for that. No one else contributed. And so we'll get into those slides later that explain what happened. And then certainly something huge happened in 1933. Below Caballo Dam, IBWC, the International Boundary and Water Commission, because of the treaty in 1906, was authorized to ensure that the water from Elephant Butte got to Mexico. So if you think about Tijuana, where the international boundary starts and where it ends in Brownsville, Texas, there's a dogleg of 60 kilometers that the international boundary actually runs off of the New Mexico, or the Mexico-United States border up to Caballo. And they put in levees, and they ensured that that canalization project would get the water to Mexico. So you have an agency there. It's a State Department agency. It's not a Department of Interior agency. But they are the ones authorized and have the jurisdiction over the flood of the bed of the river, the floodplain, and the levees. EBID has nothing to do with that. The Bureau of Reclamation has nothing to do with that. So if people want to recreate on the river banks like they have to go through IBWC for a permit. Caballo Dam, it was completed in 1938. It was built primarily as a regulating reservoir for flood control and for also the release of power generation through Elephant Butte. And our forefathers had enough vision to know that they could generate power off of Elephant Butte. And so they put in everything, the pipes through the dam to ensure that in time they could equip it with hydropower. So when that water runs through those balance valves of the Elephant Butte electric plant, where does that water go? It goes down to Caballo. And so that's where it's held. And then, of course, the Percha, Animas, several big tributaries come off the Black Range and dump in, and we collect it at Caballo Dam. Probably 1938, I'll talk about that a little bit too, the compact between Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas. That's an interesting compact. And then certainly 1971 was huge for this valley. The farmers in this valley paid off the United States government. What? You pay off the government? Yeah, we did. So those are huge dates that a lot of people don't realize played a big role in where we are today. Now, a little bit about the dam. That was at one time probably the largest community in the Southwest. There was sometimes as many as 1,000 to 5,000 workers working on the dam. We're talking, you know, the 1910s through the 1916s. They had huge camps. They had populations of farmers, businesses, families, stores, churches, a hospital. This was a hospital there. So that dam and the building of that dam brought a lot of people here from the east to the west for job opportunities. Again, it's hard to believe that this was our forefathers built this. At one time, Elephant Butte Dam was the largest dam in the world. They had power plants that mixed the concrete, hoisted machinery, and they were powered by 3 steam turbine generators. The government operated the sand and cement plant to be mixed with 300,000 barrels to make 410 cubic yards of concrete. Where did they get the barrels of concrete? You know where? Right down here at the in El Paso, at that plant right there on Donovan and Paisano. That was the plant back then, right in that area, because they had the mountains in that area that could produce the cement. Then they railroaded it up to Ingle and to the dam site, and then they mixed it with the cement to make the concrete. The Elephant Butte Dam is 190 feet tall. It's about 180 feet thick at the bottom. The floodwaters to be held there could hold over 2,600,000 acre-feet of water. It could cover the island. It could cover the state of Rhode Island if it ever broke 3 feet deep. It actually has the lake behind it that stretches up about 46 miles, almost to Socorro. It was designed for one purpose. Again, what was that purpose? Agriculture. There was no recreation. There was no power. There was no fish and wildlife. There was no other flood control issues other than it was built to deliver water to farmers here in this valley. And so I'll talk to you a little bit later, but there's the amount of storage there was separated between New Mexico, Texas, and Mexico. So between 1905 and 1916, this is the Rio Grande project. It starts at Elephant Butte, includes Caballo. It goes through the Hatch Valley, the Mesilla Valley. It reaches into the upper valley of Texas and the lower valley around the Isleta Fabians area. And then it also delivers water into Mexico. So in EBID, there's 90,640 acres that we can irrigate. In El Paso County Water Improvement, there's 69,000 acres that can be irrigated. And of course, Mexico gets that 60,000 acre feet of water I spoke to earlier. Okay. So the next thing, so you have the early settlers coming in, developing this land for agriculture. Then you have a huge incident with Mexico. The government steps in and does their thing to build the project. And then in 1938, you have a compact that came about. And this is where a lot of confusion comes in the complexity of water and the management of water in our district takes hold. Colorado is where the Rio Grande starts. Headwaters up there, about 14,000 foot elevation. It crosses at Alamosa, goes through Alamosa and crosses at the state line right there, San Antonito. It's measured. They have gauging stations. So Colorado knows what they need to deliver to New Mexico. New Mexico knows what Colorado needs to keep for themselves and move to them. The river follows through the gorge in Taos and comes on down through Espanola. And right around, just between Santa Fe and Espanola, there's a gauge, Ottawee gauge, and it tells at that point what is to be delivered to Elephant Butte Dam. And from there, New Mexico can make its decisions on what water they can feed for New Mexico, but they got to keep in their focus and on their eye the fact that they can't use all the water, they have to deliver it to Texas. Where it becomes a little interesting is you can follow the water down, and right there, okay, that begins to be the problem. If you can see, we are in Texas when it comes to the compact. I don't know if you knew that, but we are in Texas. We are in geographic New Mexico, but our accounting for the water that comes into EBID, into EP number 1, into Mexico, all starts at the state line, which is not in Anthony, Texas. It's at Elephant Butte Dam. Gary, why? Because the dam, Elephant Butte Dam, was the only mainstream dam before 1938 on the river. So the compact commissioners realized they had to store that water at Elephant Butte for delivery to Mexico and Texas because there was no dam below there. And that's why right now a lot of people understand why not one drop to Texas. I'm going, wait a minute, we're in Texas. So what happens down here in our areas is something that I can speak to. We manage the surface water. Elephant Butte Irrigation manages surface water, but the state of New Mexico manages the groundwater. They have the authority over the groundwater. So it's a constant battle with the state of New Mexico as to what happens to the groundwater as it's depleted and what happens to surface water as it's used. Okay, so things about the compact that still play a big role in today. The Supreme Court case that we are in with the United States, the 3 states, is all about this compact. Because really, below Elephant Butte, all the way into El Paso, is sort of the mini compact for this compact. And it's the way that we manage the water down here that has to align with the compact of the 3 states. So appropriated water on the Rio Grande is among those 3 states, Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas, limits upstream depletions to protect downstream users. It limits upstream uses, so people have to, Colorado and New Mexico have to send water downstream. The basis of delivery obligation, upstream states are available on the flow in the river. If you have dry years, it's harder to get the water downstream as it is in years of wet water. Buffer variations in storage through Elephant Butte. Again, storage in Elephant Butte is dependent upon what comes in from Colorado and New Mexico so that we can use it here in New Mexico, southern New Mexico, and West Texas and Mexico. Colorado, it's easy to deliver the water at the state line because the river crosses. They have gauging stations. New Mexico delivers to Texas, again, at Elephant Butte Dam, not at Anthony, Texas. And included in the Rio Grande project is the state of Texas. So it's complicated. And so that you can kind of see the lines as they draw out there from Colorado to New Mexico, you can see the lines, but then right there is compact New Mexico and the compact Texas point. And that is the heart of EBID. And the upper valley of Texas, the Canutillo, Anthony, Texas reach. Yes, sir.
So does that mean that the water that's delivered in New Mexico below Elephant Butte is part of Texas's allocation?
Yes, sir.
Is that part of the court case?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's crazy.
Complicated.
Yeah. If I could, I would dye the different colors of water. You know, that's Texas water, ours is a different color. But it's crazy. Okay, so what this all does to climate change, the potential climate change impacts, it affects everything, everything. The project, the compact, EBID, City of Las Cruces, it doesn't matter. We're all involved in this thing when I'm dealing with surface water. Okay. Increasingly arid climate wasn't contemplated in the compact and the project and the obligations of the compact to deliver to the downstream states. Okay, this is 1938. Hydrologic effects of drought, aridity, was disproportionately affects downstream. Has a big bearing on what's happening right now. Compact magnifies downstream effects. It sure does. You know, why is there water running year-round in Middle Rio Grande and not down here? Why is the river wet up there and not down here? All this stuff brings questions. Changing hydrology of the basin. Changing hydrology. We're in a drought. It's changing how this project operates. It leads to persistent compact violations. We're in Supreme Court. Okay, groundwater depletion delays mark and mask the effects. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Similar scenarios playing out around the world. This is not unique to New Mexico. Mel and I were talking about the Colorado River. 7 states involved in serious drought and compact issues. They have to deliver water to Mexico under a treaty obligation as well. Okay, so let's start with EBID, because we're the next generation that came in after the Spanish settlers, the takeover from the United States. The compact takes place, and then in 1978, that's a date I remember, that's when I started working for EBID. We took over from the Bureau of Reclamation the operation and maintenance of the district. For 60 years, this whole system was operated by the federal government from 1916 up to 1978. So if you had an issue, you had to call the government. They came to help you. And so once we paid out in 71, 72, we had about a 6-year transition working with the federal government to see, because the farmer says we can run it better than the government. And so it took about 6-7 years for the government to transition over to where Elephant Butte Irrigation's board entered into contracts, one in 1980 and one in 1987, to maintain and operate the diversion dams and operate and maintain the canals owned by the government. They were still owned by the government. I think the important one here is, and I have to say, a lot of it was to the boards. These farmers in this valley were persistent to own everything. So in 1996, I and several of the board members went to Pete Domenici, Joe Skeen, and we says, hey, we want these canals, these laterals, these drains in the name of EBID. We no longer want the government to own them. We got it done. So I'm very proud of the fact that we were the first to pay out the government, and we're the first district in the West to own and operate the canals, laterals, and drains. We got deed to them. 2008, there was an historic agreement signed. It was between EBID, EP number 1 in the Bureau, and that pretty much set the course for how we manage the water today. And, but we still have persistent litigation going on, stream adjudication, federal Supreme Court, and other federal lawsuits involved, and even local lawsuits. So I told Mel, you know, water's for fighting, whiskey's to drink. Here's something that you might not know, but this is how I have to manage the water here. Once the water reaches the storage dam, Elephant Butte, we then call for the Bureau to release the water. And then, of course, they send it down to Caballo, and from Caballo, the first diversion is at Hatch. We take out water there for about 18,000 acres of farmland in Hatch. The water moves on down to Leesburg Dam, which is about 22 miles north of here. And we water the upper valley of Las Cruces, Doña, all the way up to Fort Selden. And then at Mesilla Dam, it's the largest part of our acreage in the valley, but totally in the Mesilla Valley, there's about 72,500 acres of irrigatable land. And then, of course, we have to deliver from that point, from Mesilla Dam down to the state line. At Mesilla Dam, I also delivered the water to the Texas, through our canal system, I deliver water to Texas. Okay, remember that I pointed out, you know, history has a tendency to repeat itself. Off this chart in 1915 was a terrible drought. That was all through the, I think, right up until about right around 1900. Then we were getting some flooding, flash floods that changed the course of the river and so forth. But there was a lot of drought before this wet cycle, which was from 1916 to 1950. And in fact, if you look at the storage level, about 1944, the water actually spilled over the dam. Historic. My dad saw it, my grandfather saw it. I didn't see that one. But it immediately, by 1950, dropped off. 51, we were in one heck of a drought. Mel can probably remember this. My dad, my grandfather, we were all farming here. And in that crisis, we went to the United States and says, hey, what can we do? And they said, well, drill wells, pump the water out of the ground. Federal government said, yeah, it's okay. State of New Mexico said, we don't have a problem with that. So we started drilling wells to supplement those years of drought. You can see that there was a drought worse in right around 1952. that brought Elephant Butte storage somewhere down around 75,000 acre feet. Remember, it can hold 2 million. There was a fish kill. There was serious problems back then in a past drought. And then all of a sudden, I come to work in 1978, and we get a great supply of water for 23 years. So look at that cycle. See, it's about every 35, 40 years. And then now, what's happened? 2003, we come into the drought that we are now. My prediction, if you follow that, about 2032, 2033, we're gonna get another wet cycle, and we're gonna fill and spill. I'm sticking to that story. I might not be around then, but you can say, yeah, I remember Gary James. But this drought is a little different. It's hotter than that drought in the 50s. The temperatures are hotter, no doubt. So it's creating different scenarios of weather patterns. And so we'll have to watch this closely. But right now, I don't look for a great year next year, just based on the weather patterns. And I'll talk to you about that in a minute. Okay. So what did EBID do about this over the last 100 years? Well, we did a lot of things, not just EBID, but the Bureau did a lot of things. But the construction of the project helped during the climate change back then in the 1910s when they built it. Right after they finished that dam in 1916, it filled up. And by 1944, it spilled. The drainage system of groundwater table control, and that was returned because EBID the Bureau came in and built the drains through this valley. Played a major part in lowering the water table from Hatch all the way down to El Paso. The drains are very important to the functionality of managing the surface water and balancing it with the groundwater. The river canalization took place. Drought responses, farmers put in wells. Flood control dams were built in the 1950s. These were through the Soil Conservation Service. There's 27 of them that I maintain between Anthony and Hatch. There are another 75 or so maintained by the Flood Control Commission, the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, and even some private dams. So there's a lot of flood control that's in this area. Why? Because floods happen. The district took over in the 80s and 90s. We began measuring our water. We put a proactive SCADA system in and started with it in the 90s, and now we still manage it today. Stormwater management, things that I saw happen made me have to react. Hatch flood, 2006. Doña flood, 2008. El Paso flood, 2009. All of these things, I'm going, what do I do with this water that's standing in people's property and standing in people's and farmers' farmland? So we started strategies to develop that. And of course, that operating agreement helped a lot. Okay, somebody asked, what kind of crops do you grow? Basically, 4. You can see back in 1953, there was maybe less than 5,000 acres of pecan trees. Do you know whose pecan orchard that was? Stallman's, the first 2 plant trees in this valley, okay? Cotton prices, you can see we had like 65,000 acres of cotton back in the 50s. Pima, short staple, long staple, the perfect crop when you're in a drought because it's very low water use for cotton. However, so much of cotton was being grown here that other countries started realizing, oh, wow, we need to grow cotton. So the market really created the crash of growing cotton here. We still grow it, but not near as much. And the market is very variable based upon other world countries that are growing it. You can see that continual climb of pecans. Then the other one that's here that maintains itself pretty well is alfalfa. We grow about 18,000 to 20,000 acres of alfalfa. Vegetables, that's onions, chili, lettuce, cabbage, watermelons, all those kind of things. Pretty much were grown at a time when there was, the markets were available. Now we're competing with California, Arizona for those markets, so it's variable. And then, of course, there is some forage grains and things grown. But pretty much that's the history of the crops, and we're pretty much still farming those and watering those crops. Okay. EBID realized that with this fluctuation that's going on between wet years and dry years, that we had to do a lot of things internally to make our system more efficient and be able to manage floodwater more efficient, and then deal with endangered species that are in our area, and to deal with the environmental ecological movement that came through this valley. And so we had to do several things to change the way that we used to operate to the way we operate now. So let me just share with you some of those. Okay, this one's kind of interesting if you have never seen a slide like this, but the Rio Grande's flowing water, we release it from Elephant Butte Dam. So what do we do with it? As soon as it's released from Elephant Butte and Caballo in an irrigation season, we divert it and we take it to a canal. Those canals then take it, they seep because they're earthen lined. So where is that water going? It's going to groundwater. Then we deliver it to the fields. The crop takes some of it. The evaporation takes some of it. And yet the fields also drain into what is now those 300 miles of drains through the valley. And then that water is returned back to the river, and that water is used to deliver to Texas. So it makes it part of that project supply. Critical things that happen. The problem now is that we don't have this surface water available like we used to. So you can see how the seepage from the canal, the fields, the drain, all reflect on the groundwater below us. And the river also contributes to the groundwater here to this valley. But what came along? The wells. What's even worse is there's more wells. City wells, municipal wells, mutual domestic wells, industrial wells, farmers' wells, domestic wells. They all compete now for that same amount of water that's underground. And so what happens is the measurement. I can measure surface water, and that's what I'll show you, but I've also learned how to measure groundwater. So I kind of have an idea of what's happening below us, because it's easy for any of you to go with me up to Elephant Butte right now and say, Gary, you're out of luck next year. There's no water in the lake. It's something you can see. Tell me what's below. Tell me what's below. So that's where I had to come up with the instruments, the system that could go down into the wells, into the groundwater table and determine where that water is fluctuating. Okay, so we completely in 2014, good Lord was on my side, and he gave me some people that came across my path that helped me convert our office and our field water ordering to a new technology. We have laptops for ditch riders now that they can look at real-time connections to where their water is in a certain canal and know who's placed the order. 2016, we integrated that with the GIS applications, so we have visual maps that show where the water is, where it's headed, and so forth. 2017, we developed the system on our smartphones. So when I use my smartphone, it rings and it tells me, Gary, you have a 2-inch, 3-inch storm and dimming coming your way. Because we put weather stations, we put rain gauges out on the east and west mesas now, working with BLM to understand how I need to prepare for something that's coming my way. We also did improvements to scheduling, delivery, and making our system more efficient. And we're still integrating more of our SCADA system to actually automate my gates and be able to deliver the water more efficiently, not necessarily by hand labor, but by automation. The technology out there now is unbelievable. Okay, so this is example field software. This is what the ditch rider gets to see. He gets to see the orders that have been placed on his ditch. He gets to monitor their balances. He gets to schedule their efficiencies because the farmer downstream says, where's my water? The field software will tell that farmer and that ditch rider where it is, and it's all in real time. About every 15 minutes, this data is renewed. In the office, it allows a visual crop distribution. This is just on one canal on one irrigation order. You can see how much went to pecans, how much was idle, how much went to other crops, and it proves the efficiency knowing what crop is being grown so that you can budget, because crops, if you can figure out when the crop needs the water, then you can budget the water for when that crop needs it and have it ready for when that crop wants it. And it improves the scheduling and delivery. And then we apply it to the phone. Like I said, farmers now, they place the order, they can follow their water order to when it should get to their field. It shows who's watering now, who's scheduled to irrigate, shows who's behind, and it gives current delivery information to those farmers if they want to use this system. Our RTU system now is about 470 total field sites. The polls are every 30 minutes. Line of sight, under a radio frequency that we have 6 mountaintop repeater sites. And the type of monitoring we do now are dam releases, river stations, diversion canals, lateral headings, spillways, farmer irrigation wells, groundwater wells, weather stations, rain gauges, and flood control dams. So we look at a lot of stuff that happens in our valley as it affects mostly surface water, whether it's flood flows, rainstorms, but also we can tap into what's happening in the groundwater. Okay, so what we had to do in the early years of the 2000s was deal with some intense monsoon events. And what we did is we took a drain that we owned and we just widened it in our right-of-way. So what used to be maybe 30 feet, if you looked at that bottom slide and you see the green cattails, that was the width of the drain that we normally use. We had enough space to widen it. I capture as much as 20, in some cases, up to about 20,000 acre-feet of floodwater that comes off of Wild Arroyo and Doña. And this captures it, it slows it down, it gives me time to maintain, to make a decision. Do I send it to the river? Do I maybe reuse that water? Or do we allow it to percolate through the ground and recharge the aquifer? So that's another reason why drains have become one of my big projects to store stormwater. It supports habitat, which was an afterthought. I was just trying to control the flood. And after that, if you go up on the old highway just below Fort Selden, you'll see this site. It's a forest of cottonwoods now. Where you see one or two, it's a forest of cottonwoods. Because this environment that I've created is suitable for habitat. And so I believe it's going to be the future way to tap into funding that could come our way is to prove that through anything I do, I can also improve the habitat. It's a shallow depth to the groundwater. It's a way to recharge. It also mitigates E. coli because it sits out there and cooks. So before it gets to the river, you don't have any E. coli. So there's a lot of water quality things that affect this. Slowing it, retention, infiltration, those are all benefits of capturing floodwater. And then, of course, we put it back in an agricultural drain where we can control the water table and we can remove salts from the ground by pushing the salts down, getting them back to the river. And then, of course, it establishes habitat in open spaces. Let's see. Right here is, I want to switch to groundwater. Every zone here has been analyzed by our groundwater resource director. And so we sort of understand where the impacts to water come when you pump it out of the ground. And so this is just a groundwater modeling that we target capture sites where we put floodwater to recharge. If you're pulling down the water in a certain area, if I can get floodwater to that area where we're pulling it down by pumping, I can recharge the aquifer in those sites. Some of these areas are close by. The Selden was one of them I just showed you, where we target when floodwater gets in on top of the irrigation water order. I can determine through these type of modeling scenarios where I need to put that floodwater. And I can direct the path through managing that floodwater down to the place where I need it the most to help recharge an aquifer. Some of the other things we've done is we looked at modifications of existing drainage facilities to widen them, to build more capacity, and to actually build regulating structures inside those drains so I can manipulate and manage that water more effectively. Again, flood control, increasing usable water, habitat, water quality, they all help from this approach that we've taken to try to manage our floodwater. It also helps in formal decisions that we have to make, design, operations, values, utility functions. How does this all help the overall effect of our groundwater pumping in the valley? And then just dealing with the uncertainty. I have to be ready. You never know when you're going to get a storm, so I have to be ready to capture it when it happens. Unfortunately, storms happen at night, and so we have to have people out there patrolling, and then we also have the SCADA system to allow us to know if something's coming. But you have to understand, monsoon events start between July 1st and into September, normally. That's the middle of our irrigation season. So if I have my canals full of irrigation water, how in the heck am I going to accept flood water? This SCADA gives me that opportunity. If I have 4 or 5 hours of time between a storm getting into the valley and I have a ditch full of water, I can find a home for that water. Farmers will take it. And I'm evacuating our canal system for storm events. This is a little bit more about our advanced warning system, real-time monitoring. We do this, we have it going all the time. And not much more to say about that other than that we have Doppler and we follow these storms. Doppler Dave calls me and says, "Hey, is it flooding in Hatch?" And I'm going, "You're the weatherman." But we know a lot of what's going on because we have weather stations in the east and west mesas that tell us ourselves. We utilize imaging through New Mexico State. We have a lot of, we use them a lot, New Mexico State. We're sort of a test lab for their engineering department, their ecology department. So very proud of the fact we can work with local university. This is how I can tell. I look, this is the gauges. These are 5 different gauges that from the release from Caballo, where the water is, you can see those spikes. At any time, I can look at this gauge on my website. You're all welcome to it. It's real-time data. It's open to the public. You can see where the water is coming down and advancing through the system from Caballo all the way down to El Paso. We have 7 operational stations that EBID owns and operates. We have 20-minute real-time data radio telemetry polling. Our operations manages this. We flood and we can track all kinds of storms coming and water that's in our system. And we have all this on our website for other agencies to use. So this is a typical event that happened a few years ago, but the Placitas Arroyo, before the huge flood in Hatch, spiked. And then the Rincon Arroyo, if you know where that one is, just as you're going towards Albuquerque, you'll go across that arroyo. In one event, we got 1,000 acre-feet more than we had in the river. That hit the river on top of the irrigation order. So we had to know what to do with it. And that's how we know how to capture these events and then utilize them through the valley, through our drain system to recharge our aquifers. These are a couple of ponds down at the very end, down in the Sunland Park and Apra area. And I acquired this from a developer and was able to widen the drain and make 2 ponds here that capture floodwater as well as any floodwater coming down from the North Valley into the very southern part of our county. There's a lot of flooding that can happen in Doña, in the Apra Sunland Park area, and these ponds help find a home for that floodwater. So we've adapted and utilized other sources to acquire the land and then use them for storage ponds. Flood control facilities, like I mentioned before, we have over 100 aging, under-designed flood control dams throughout this valley. Not all of them belong to EBID. We have 27 of them. But it's a false sense of security, folks. For you guys on the PNZ, you'll see a dam up there on the east side of the interstate and say, well, that dam's there. It's going to protect everything below. Those were built in the 1950s. They've already outlived their capacity in life. The only way I can do anything is keep the sediment, clean out the sediment, keep them safe, so that if we had an event, maybe 50-year storm event, I don't think they would hold a 100-year storm event. You're going to have some serious flooding in this valley. That's why they came in the 50s, because of the serious flooding that was in the valleys back then. So flood control facilities is huge. To fix one of these dams that broke or spilled over, went over its spillway, you're talking maybe $4 to $5 million each to repair. So I work with the Doña Flood Control Commission. I work with the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, and of course EBID has to manage 27 of these themselves. So there's challenges now to storage, but there is money available through this huge announcement that was made a few months ago, back in August, that $60 million is available to anyone, not EBID, to anyone below Caballo Dam.
Repeat that again?
There was an announcement made in August of this year by the Department of Interior Secretary, Deb Haaland, that said that through the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Bill Act, bipartisan infrastructure law, that $60 million is available to anyone below Caballo Dam for water efficiencies, flood control, watershed management, all of those things. I feel like I might not be the one to initiate the project, but whoever initiates the project is ultimately going to say, how do I get the water off my farm? And I'm going to go, I got a drain. I got something that I can help you with. And I think there's an opportunity here, guys. I've never seen an investment this large for this area since the building of the dam. I believe on November 21st, there'll be some announcements coming out real soon about an open meeting where they're going to announce how you all can tap in to utilizing these funds. So I'm here to announce that, I hope you guys are interested. Certainly, I'm already working with people that I know in this room that we're going to try to help them in their business and their farm operation. I also know that I'm working with soil and water conservation districts in the city of Las Cruces doing some things that would even enhance and help them with some of their opportunities to get water into Byrne Lake, for instance, as a storage of flood water that can recharge what happens to the groundwater in the city limits. So exciting times. And I'm hoping that those visions I have, I can share with other people if they call on me for help. So I want to just go through this real quick. Okay, so how do we manage the groundwater? From Hatch to Sunland Park, we have over 60 monitoring wells, deep to shallow groundwater wells. They don't pump, they just monitor the groundwater. We put our own telemetry, our piezometers down into the deepest part of those wells. Some of them are 300 feet deep, all the way up to the shallow, maybe 180 feet. And they measure every day the groundwater table. So you can imagine if they're spread out through the valley, and right now everybody's relying on groundwater because we don't have enough surface water, then you can almost see the depletion lower itself of pumping in the groundwater table lowers. But at the same time, when you apply the river water, the flood irrigation, the storm events, you can then see the recharge come back. It's hydrologically connected. It's there as visual as I can tell you. And we've been doing this since about 2010. And I hired a PhD that works for me, Dr. Fox, Eric Fox. He used to work for the state engineer, and now he works for me. And he manages this water for me and for the board of directors so that we know where it is. And yeah, in some areas in this valley, you can see 14, 15, maybe even more depth to our water table. But since 2010 to now, it's about, we're losing definitely groundwater, but the ceiling isn't falling in. We're not crashing. We really aren't. And a lot of people have that fear that, oh my God, what are we going to do next year? Well, I'm here to say that, we have reliable sources. I'm not making this stuff up, that kind of give us an idea of what's happening below. And certainly, yeah, we have to be mindful of it. That's why I try to put floodwater there when I don't have surface water from Elephant Butte. But you can see the reaction. And so over a period of time, I think Dr. Fox has said that on average, there's about a 7-foot variance. That's not bad. So we do this through these goals here that I present. I won't go through each one of them, but we do have that system in place. that monitors our groundwater. And you can go to our website, and you can click on groundwater monitoring wells, and you can see the same thing I'm trying to explain to you here. It's not magic, but it's real time.
I have a question, Gary. So what areas of the county is where the water table has gone down the most that you've noticed as far as Doña County goes?
I would say that we put a lot of attention around here. You know, you have competing wells, you have city wells, you have Doña mutual domestic wells, you got Lower Rio Grande water user wells, and you got farmer wells. So this is a big area that we have to watch. For surface deliveries, and where I look to use floodwater is in the heart of the pecan country. They use a lot of water. But I can tell you that when we have flood events, I put a lot of water right back into those drains that are in those areas where we have pecan orchards. In Hatch, it's a little different because Hatch is a shallow aquifer. They don't have the robust, deep aquifer like the Mesilla Valley. We have a shallow alluvium, and then we have the Santa Fe Bolson. It's 1,000+ feet deep. The shallow alluvium, 300 feet, 400 feet deep. Most of the farmers' wells are in that, but some of those farmers have gone to the deeper one. So is some of the city wells. In Hatch, you don't have that luxury. So when they pump water out of that valley, they're pumping a lot of salt on their farm because the aquifer is shallow and it holds a lot of salt. So we have to balance that out, and certainly we try to do that, and the farmers do it with their own innovative ways that they farm up there for onions and chili and things. Probably the majority of Hatch is in drip irrigation now. Majority of Hatch, because they know the importance of growing that crop and getting the best yield is controlling the salt. But good question. I'd say that, you know, in a lot of ways, right around here, the vicinity here, plus the pecan orchards, that pretty much the heart of pecan orchards are just south of here, down towards La Mesa and Chamberino, that area. Yes.
How much of an impact do we get from evaporation from the surface water irrigation? I mean, is it enough to justify looking at drip systems I've seen drip systems applied in pecan fields and onion fields, and of course in the wine industry. Is there any advantage to that?
Oh, yeah. I think the more that we have to deal with this drought, the more that you're going to find farmers on their own looking at other water savings methods. Doesn't mean that just because you drip, you're using less water. You still need a lot of water to grow pecans if you're sprinkling them and you're right. Right now, I would say that we deliver about 55% of what we divert into our canal system. 55. If we were able to concrete line or pipe our system alone, we would probably get up to 90% or more efficient. That's a lot of water savings. And so right now the farmers are trying to do it on farm. That's their business. I don't get involved in that. But if they're doing that on their farm, then I have to figure out how to get the water to them quicker, more efficient, so that they can utilize it on their farm through drip systems, sprinkler systems. But evap is a big loss in the water just going up. But you got to also understand what do these trees do in this valley? They're the biggest filter system that we have for carbon dioxide. We don't have the pollution from El Paso because these trees take a lot of that. People come here for a green valley. And they like driving and up through, going to Chopez or someplace and going through the orchards. This is an attraction here. So I don't want to see it go away. I want to see a balance. I want to see the opportunity that we all come together and collaborate on the best way to use a limited supply with a high demand from population and also from crops. It's not easy, but we have the opportunity to come together at a point right now where the future has a lot of possibilities with this funding that we have available. We should really take heart as to how the county, the city, EBID, the Flood Control Commission, everybody has a stake at the table now. And that's what I hope we get out of this. Let me finish, I'm almost done, and then I'll answer as many questions. Sorry, it's taking so long. This is what I have to live with, the swiffle. The southwest willow flycatcher is an endangered species in our area. In the Albuquerque area, it's a minnow, about 3 inches long, called the silvery minnow. But this little bird created a huge problem for EBID a few years ago, but we were able to remedy that problem. The designation of this critical bird, this endangered bird, was, guess where? Targeted hatch, the chili capital of the world. And I'm going, oh my God, we can't let that happen. So we worked with different agencies, the IBWC, the World Wildlife Fund, Audubon, New Mexico, to come up with a reasonable way that we could maybe deal and mitigate the issues of this critical habitat coming in. And so from 2002 up into 2011, we worked with all these agencies to actually come to an agreement. And when you think about a bunch of farmers working with environmentalists, you're going, that doesn't sound very good, but it worked out great. And I'm here to tell you that through this institutional framework, we actually developed a policy within EBID that worked with EBID, Audubon, New Mexico, and US IBWC to figure out a way where we allowed these environmentalists that wanted the habitat for these birds to become environmental farmers. They acquired from EBID water rights that somebody was willing to give up, that didn't want to farm anymore, and we transferred those EBID water rights to that floodplain inside the river. And because of that, IBWC, the Fish and Wildlife Service, they planted trees. And they were thinking that the only way they could get water to this tree is a river flow. We says, no, be a farmer. We'll irrigate it. Learn to irrigate your habitat. They're going, what? And so it took a lot of time, a lot of education, but we were able to instruct them and work with them, and EBID set policies. And right there, the bullet, the last bullet, the second to the last bullet, it says U.S. Fish and Wildlife excluded EBID from critical habitat designation, March 2013. And there, Senator Bingham and Steve Pierce are going, like, how did you do that? And we said, well, we just educated everybody. We worked together and we figured out a way to do it. And so that went away, that problem. So we, in the board, set forth an environmental water transaction policy and passed it in 2013. And so just a little bit of, here's where they started planting these cottonwoods. And I'm going, oh my God, they'll never grow, because they were planting them in the floodplain and just thinking that river water would be enough for them to grow these trees. And I said, no, we have a wasteway that delivers water to the river from our system in emergencies. Why don't we set up something where I can you call for the order just like a farmer does, You place the order with it, our ditch riders will deliver it to this facility, this infrastructure we have that goes right past this, and we'll irrigate it for you. And they're going, oh, yeah, right. But the policy that we put in place plays a role in how we did it. So here you go, 2014. 1 year later, we're irrigating those trees with EBID water that was acquired by IBWC from EBID, and we transferred those water rights, those ag rights, to this ground that didn't have ag rights. And we said, those cottonwoods are no different than a pecan tree. It's vegetation, we can irrigate it. And they said, wow, let's do it. 2015, and that's where they are. And I went in with that and tried to answer as many questions as you have for me, but thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So the chart that you had that showed which crops were being grown,
Yes.
I don't know if this was my interpretation of that, but it looked like there was a general decline in overall agricultural acreage. Are we seeing a decline in agriculture, within the district?
Yes, sir. Good point. Right now, out of the 90,640, I think last year we might have watered 20,000 acres sitting idle, basically because we don't have the surface water to irrigate those farm fields. So many of those farmers are having to rely on their groundwater.
Are those, Gary, are those junior rights?
Excuse me?
The farmers that aren't irrigating, are those junior water right?
No,
No,
those are senior.
though they are.
Yes, sir. In 1903, through the stream adjudication, let me clarify something. Water rights that a farmer has is not a water right. It's the right to use the water. If they pay their water bill, their assessment every year, just like you have to pay property tax, you own the property. What happens when you don't pay your property tax? Okay, the farmer's the same way. If he pays for his water, he gets to use the water, okay? And normally, under full supply conditions, he's eligible for 3 acre-feet per acre of water, as long as he pays that assessment. Right now, this year, he only got 12 inches. 12 inches out of 3 acre-feet. He still has to pay the assessment. He still has to pay it because the assessment is for the operation and maintenance of the system. It's not for his water right. And so when he has to pay $100 for 2 acre-feet of water and only gets 12 inches, there's kind of like a tattoo on my back. They don't like it. Plus, on top of that, they have to pay their own energy costs of pumping the water out of the ground. So it's a huge burden put on a farmer in these days to even consider growing crops. But some of those that you saw were permanent, like pecans. Alfalfa, 7 years, and then they can rotate it. But they'll come back with it, and it's good for another 7 years. Cotton was annual. Vegetables, same thing. You can grow two crops of vegetables in a season, but you can't rely on surface water completely. So I don't know if that answered your question, but we are seeing a reduction of ag land being farmed. Some of it is idle. That doesn't mean they haven't paid for it, but maybe they're in a government program, like cotton sometimes gets you. So there's all kinds of rotational programs that these farmers cooperate with USDA and those sort of things. So yeah, some of that is just sitting there because they're trying to get the water the farms that are closest to the water source, the canals or their pumps. And if you have a farm, half a mile away from your major irrigation well and your canal, they'll leave that idle and transfer that water to that land right around. And so we transfer water almost daily between farmers. So it's the farmer who makes that decision. They call us, then we make our adjustments internally.
Gary, I keep hearing comments about water rights, use them or lose them. But I know that within EBID, if we have a water allocation and we don't have use for that allocation, we can sell it through EBID for that year. If you would address that for me, please, just so everybody knows.
Yeah, certainly, yeah, that's available all the time. We do that as well. As a farmer, maybe he's retired and his kids are in New York and they don't have any way to have somebody on farm. A lot of times the farmers and the neighbor farmers will say, hey, we'll rent your farm from you. Just let us have your water. So we transfer that water to that farmer who's going to cash rent or through a lease, whatever they set up between the owner and of the land and the farmer that wants to rent the land. And a lot of that happens. You won't lose your water right with EBID unless you don't pay your bill. Okay, and a lot of that happens through law. There's state law that if you have less than 2 acres of land, we try to irrigate you. We'll supply water to you. But through growth, urbanization, sometimes you're cut off from getting that water to your backyard. And if that goes delinquent after 3 years, we can put that up on the courthouse steps to take away that water right, because they never used it and they never paid for the water. So we can take it away. If you're over 2 acres and you're not paying your bill, the board has passed a policy that we can put liens on your property until you pay that bill. And we have probably out of our 90,000 acres, maybe 700 acres of folks that haven't paid their water bill. It's something that, we look at, we're concerned about, but at the same time, maybe there's opportunities down the road where we maybe would work. Again, the generations of farmers here in this valley aren't what they used to be. And I'm a third generation farmer from my grandpa and my dad. But my kids don't want to farm. So what my mom did is she decided she didn't want a subdivision around her house, farmhouse. So she found a farmer that bought the farm. And now a farmer is farming all around my house. But I love it because it's still a farm. And so those things happen.
What happens, we had a presentation about programs to allow land to go fallow, and the objections were that you lose the water rights. What's coordinated there in a situation where there's a government program like this?
Okay, the one that I know about and the one that EBID developed, you don't lose the water right ever. The water, if you pay for the water that you own as far as EBID water right, it's a pertinent to that land. It can't go anywhere else except through a transfer to another EBID property that has EBID rights. I can't transfer those EBID rights to the East Mesa. Can't do it. It's out of the boundaries of the district. Okay. And it ain't going to a farm. The water right for EBID is a surface water right, okay? So repeat the question again.
Well, if there's a program to allow land to go fallow.
Okay, that is an interstate streams OSC state of state engineer program. It's voluntary right now. It's not buy and dry. They go into a fallowing program, I think it's 3 years, rotational fallowing. But they don't lose that water right. They just can't pump it, and they can't put surface water on it. And that water that the state engineer acquires for that makes up perhaps what they need to send to El Paso, Texas, to make their compact delivery. So right now, I think they've got maybe 30,000 to 4,000 acres out of 90 in that program, and they're paying the farmer not to farm. But only up to about 3 years, as I understand their program. Someone like Ryan Serrano from Las Cruces, he could come in and give you a little bit more information about that program. But it's not a buy and dry, and it's voluntary right now. And in other Arizona, California, the cities are drying up, buying out the farmer completely. And that's not good, because we need to eat. but it's happening, but not yet here.
Who is Brian Serrano? Who's he with?
He's the, works for Interstate Streams Commission. I think his office is over here off of Hickory. Because he used to work for the office of the state engineer, and he got promoted over to the Interstate Streams Commission. And they're the ones putting the program together.
Just a quick question. Is Elephant Butte still generating electricity?
Yes, sir.
And how much does it generate?
800 kilowatts,
So that's,
not much. And it goes into an exchange, they call it Western Area Power Association, WAPA. And so it really doesn't come down here to keep the lights on in Las Cruces, but it goes into a big energy program.
okay, thanks.
Mr. I have a question. Chris Valencia, I have a question. Have you seen any change in the water system since the introduction of cannabis, of the cannabis industry?
No. A lot of that is groundwater. It's going into greenhouses. They tried to grow it in a furrow field, and it got populated with weeds real quick. So I think you don't see much cannabis, and hemp was the other one that was grown here for a while, just experimental. Hemp was even tried in the 80s as a new way, a newer type of crop use. But the market, you couldn't get anybody, once you bailed to hemp, there's no way to move it to a rope manufacturers or someone that uses hemp for that purpose. So it just kind of, and then the hemp cannabis thing kicked in, but I don't see much. I don't even think we have anybody anymore that's ordering surface water to deliver to a cannabis farm. Most of them have realized we better put it in a greenhouse and pump it out of the ground.
Many questions. Again, I thank you very much, Gary, for being here. What is the saying again about water and whiskey?
Yeah.
How does that go?
Water's for fighting, whiskey's for drinking.
That's it. Did you get that, Janine? All right. There's so many questions. I mean, for myself, we have questions out at Walmart, the grocery stores, right? And they said, why is it that the county, the state, whatever, some people just want information, right? That you're flood irrigating pecan orchards, right? And then we talked about evaporation rates and alternative ways of irrigation. And sometimes it's difficult for me to explain to them because I don't know all the intricacies of delivering water, water information. And so I hope that maybe you can give us some information if they ask, well, how much water does a matured pecan tree use? And I thought, I have no information regarding that.
I can tell you.
And so when you multiply that by so many trees, right, that would give us a better answer, wouldn't it?
If a farmer does what he wants to improve his productivity on his farm, he will put on-farm improvements. And in my years working for the district, something that was magically introduced here in this valley was laser leveling. If the first laser leveling equipment came from Jack Darbyshire in Anthony in a fab shop. But a laser level can take all the bumps and low spots in a field and make them as flat as this countertop with enough fall that you open the gates with high flow turnouts that farmers have put in, and you can water across. All they need is 4 inches of water, a pecan orchard per acre. Okay, you can water it in about an hour and a half. So this idea of, it's all going to flood, it's a waste of water, is not necessarily true. And the technology nowadays, the way that they can, these farmers have piezometers in their fields. They have soil testing equipment. They know exactly what their orchard will take. So on 12 inches of water that I gave them, they could irrigate 4 times this year, or 3. So, and then they can purchase water from EBID from those who don't want to farm, and we will line that farmer that's got water for sale to the farmer that needs the water, and they negotiate the deal for the transfer of water. So when I look at flood irrigation, I think of it as a benefit to the aquifer. A lot of people don't realize that because a lot of that 4 inches doesn't just go to the crop. A lot of it goes back into the aquifer, the groundwater. And so you have 3 main sources of recharge. Remember I told you we're hydrologically connected to the groundwater. So when you turn on the river, the groundwater responds immediately, just with the river flow. That water going to Texas a few months that just ended a couple of weeks ago was recharging our aquifer. The second way is our distribution system, because it takes the water away from the river and puts it across the valley floor through the network of canals and laterals. We got 300 miles, and they're dirt lined. So they're seeping. The river's seeping, and now the canals are seeping. The third way is the flood irrigation. It definitely improves the longevity, not necessarily completely cures it, but helps in the longevity of keeping the aquifer balanced and renewable. So those 3 ways right there are critical. Whenever you see water, surface water in the river, you can tell, man, the aquifer just responds. Now, because of the drought and only 12 inches that we gave the farmer, there's a lot of pumping from everybody and it goes down. So you wait maybe November, December, and you'll see the water table come back up because it's responding to the after effect. You know, groundwater pumping masks, you can't see it instantly. You can read what's happening, but there's a reaction to the groundwater as it finds its way back up to equilibrium. So I'm saying that, yeah, over these last 23 years, I'm not denying the the water table is dropping, but not at the degree that people think it is. We're still doing well, I feel. And the more water that we can extend our irrigation, if we go, remember, Mel, we had 8 months of irrigation seasons. 8 months. I'm lucky to get 2.5. So the longer that I can keep surface water in the system, the better it is for our aquifer. So there's a lot of misinformation, understandably, depending on who you want to talk to. But I think, there's a lot of opportunities, again, where I would hope that we can collaborate more with those other users, the urban users, the mutual domestic users, the domestic users, so that everybody understands, hey, we got to work on this together. It's not just the farmers doing this. And yeah, I like red and green chili, so I wanted to see kept growing. But there's arguments all over the place about, no, ag is using too much of the water. But I don't know if you can say it's all going to that crop. It goes to the environment, evaporation, that doesn't hurt. It goes into the ground, that doesn't hurt. Carbon sequestration, what's wrong with that? Farmers do it all the time right here with these orchards. Those are all the buzzwords you hear, but nobody gives the farmer credit for what he does. And I'm just here to say, I'm a farm boy, and I want to see this valley continue to be farmed.
So on the percolation rate of water, Dr. Ferdinand gave us a presentation that 40% of the water that's being used on flood irrigation does permeate down to the water aquifer. And I was wondering what happens to the other 60%.
The trees take it, okay? The trees take a lot of that water, just the tap root of a pecan orchard, of a pecan tree goes pretty deep. Then it's got its feeler roots out to protect the umbrella of the tree. So there's a lot of evaporation that goes on. I'm not going to challenge the scientists, but I'm going to just say that yeah, we have the same problem with our canals. When you have 300 miles of canals and you put it into a dirt line system with weeds, and seepage and evaporation, we lose about 45% of that water. Now, if I pipe it, and we put in piped projects, I can save probably 324 acre-feet per mile. That's a heck of a lot of water savings in a year if I just had the money to plumb our district.
Not to mention the labor of those canals.
Yes,
Maintain.
that's right. You might see your assessment go down because there'd be less labor. Because I have to mow them, I have to grade them, I have to use herbicides on those ditches. All of that stuff takes away the water getting to the crop. So when I irrigate a pecan orchard, he's only getting 55% of what his order was for. So do the math, it's a tough time right now because of this drought and the circumstances that we are facing. But I still believe improving the infrastructure could take a giant leap to more water savings, more than fouling property.
I have a question for you. You were talking about the expense of piping. Could you tap into that $60 million that's available to use to improve the infrastructure?
Oh, yeah. I got my eyes set on it.
Okay, all right.
But they won't give it just to me. I'm going to have to find somebody to work with me,
Okay.
okay? Like the city of Las Cruces, Doña County, Soil and Water Conservation District, whatever. Because they still have the problem of finding a way for that water to get the river after a flood. It's everybody's problem. Look what's happening in Florida and the Southeast. They don't have the drainage system to just get the water out. It's ponded. But here we have a drainage system that works. It doesn't work like it used to when you had full water years and that return flow was a part of the delivery to El Paso and Mexico. You don't have it anymore because the water table's just right below the invert of those drains. And so I'm having to use the drains for a different reason now. Flood water. If I can put flood water in there, then I can recharge the aquifer. So that's my goal. And then also the savings that comes from piping or plumbing, replumbing your lateral and canal system. It would work. So I just need partners.
So Gary, on the piping issue again, could there be any water compacts between the state of New Mexico, Arizona, and maybe possibly Arizona to tap water from the ocean and desalinate it on its way up here, or for storage?
Those are pipe dreams.
It's a pipe dream, I know.
No, I don't. I mean, there's been attempts to get the water from the Mississippi, from Canada, but the largest desal plant that desalinates the water that is ocean, typically ocean salinity, is right there in El Paso. It's in El Paso. The Tularosa Basin in Alamogordo leaks into the Hueco Bolson. The Hueco Bolson isn't recharged by a river. So that's just accumulated salty water. Fort Bliss and the El Paso utilities joined together to put the largest inland desal plant in the United States. Right there, right over the Franklin Mountains. It furnishes 27 million gallons a day to the city of El Paso for drinking water supply. It's incredible use of another source. So I have a real good friend. He had his 92nd birthday Monday. His name is John Hawley. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's one of the greatest hydrologists, geologists that I know. And he can tell you, just walking through this valley, what's under every rock as far as groundwater. So I called John a few years ago. I said, John, how in the heck does El Paso get the luxury of having this crappy water, but then be able to develop it into a drinking supply? He says, Gary, you got the same supply right here on the West Mesa. And it's not as bad as ocean water. It's brackish water. And I'm going, what? And sure enough, there is a place out here on the West Mesa on the old highway to Palomas. I think it's Highway 8 and out there towards the monument. It's not in the monument, but it's close to it, where there is a supply of brackish water that could keep us all in business. And we have folks thinking about this 60 million that want to use some of it to develop and research the possibility of using brackish water. Saline water, like over there in El Paso, is highly expensive. They put that plant in 10 years ago, and the technology wasn't there. And so it cost them some big bucks to put it in. But working with the Department of Defense, Fort Bliss, they were able to utilize their cost share, and they were able to put that plant in. Brackish water out here, we've had it tested. It's not near as difficult or expensive to turn into a drinking water supply. My thinking, you put it down there and you put a pipeline all the way here to the West Mesa. You drop off, you water La Union, Chamberino, La Mesa, all of this with a different source of drinking water than pumping those domestic wells or mutual domestic wells out of the valley floor. It's a great opportunity. you talk to folks and they're going, it's too expensive. We can never afford it. I'm telling you, folks, if you put everybody together and get some of this money, maybe you could put together a small treatment plant, at least test it. You know, the naysayers go away when you prove to them you can do it. And I think there's an opportunity out here. There's, what did he say? I don't want to quote him, but he said, Gary, there's a whole lot of brackish water out there that could be blended or supplemented to keep, you know, this lower Rio Grande region viable for years. So, yeah, we have to look for other sources, Mel. We have to. But piping it in from the ocean, I don't think is feasible. But why not take advantage of what we got right here like El Paso did? And that's just vision. You have to have vision.
Even a desalination, excuse me, even a desalination plant, if we had to build one, technology's come a long way,
Oh, yeah.
a long way.
Yes, ma'am.
And so your costs, I don't think, would be quite as exorbitant.
Exactly my point. And this is less effort to it just goes through membranes and maybe sand. I don't know what they'd have to do, but the technology, correct, is there now that wasn't there 10 years ago that El Paso had to deal with. And the byproduct of dealing with what comes out the other end when you pull the salt away from the water, it's got a lot of magnesium in it and gypsum. And so there's companies that are taking that and using it in medical fields and everything else. And gypsum is, if you ever see these big piles of white soil near pecan orchards, that's gypsum. They're putting it back so it breaks up the soil. And so, I mean, there's a lot of uses for it. And then you're right there by Mexico. And Mexico needs water. The maquilas need water. So, you know, this is not just regional, but it could be international.
I mean, one solution would be for the compact states on the Colorado River Compact would be to pay California to pull water out of the ocean and let that water that they're using from Colorado go to the other states and to Mexico.
Yes. I think one of the largest new desal plants is in San Diego. They're doing exactly what you said. And unfortunately, the urban growth has taken out the opportunity. It's a nightmare because they're trying to put 60-inch diameter pipe through neighborhoods. And so you have to have the vision to know, hey, I better have a corridor that separates what I need for infrastructure versus houses. So all of that stuff plays into these visions that you have to develop. My infrastructure's been there for 100 years. So I'm going, I don't have the problem that a city might have because I have it ready. I just need to tweak it to make it fit what I need it to fit today.
And the next question, many questions, too many actually. Those deep wells in just south of Vinton Road, how deep are those wells El Paso County has?
I think they're like 800 feet deep. They're pretty deep. That's a Canatia well field. And a lot of the dispute with Texas is that well field because they're claiming, well, all the drawdown of the wells in New Mexico are creating the problem for surface water to get to Texas. And we're going, excuse me, you've got a well field yourself that's also pulling down the water that's supposed to go to the surface water users in El Paso, the farmers. So the city wells there are doing the same thing. So the operating agreement that we worked out in 2008 was trying to balance that. Of course, that well field isn't as large as New Mexico's well field when you think about all the wells that we have, but it did play a part in the negotiation. So We watch that very closely.
I'm sorry I brought that up, but I mean, all of that takes into consideration
Yes, sir.
on the adjudication of water.
Yeah.
The other one also is, from our end of it, say there was a major calamity elsewhere other than what we see now on television, right? And the influx of people coming into this region, this area. We have to make sure that we have ample supply of water and maybe recycling gray water. What's your take on that?
Do them all. We can't live any longer in a society that lives in silos. That's my water. It's your water. You're taking more of my water than my water. All of that has to go away. So you have to find all the sources that you possibly can. The desal, the brackish, great opportunity. El Paso, if you just look 45 miles down the road and don't look at El Paso as an enemy like I used to, they are far advanced in their vision of having to utilize different sources of water and look at the growth happening in El Paso, the West Mesa. It's going to join Vinton and eventually Anthony, Texas, all there on I-10. They got the water. How do they get it? They get some from the river, but not all of it. They get some from their own wells, like the Canutillo well field. They get some from desal. They get some from water farms they bought out in Del City. And even as far as Van Horn. And they're bringing this water in as they need it. They have a future of water management plan that is incredible. And here we sit just relying on surface and ground. It ain't gonna work. We need, and they just completed their wastewater treatment plant that at the end of going through their whole plant, they give you a glass of water and ask you to drink it. And it was sewage water when it went in. My board member says, can you add some whiskey to it? But I'm telling you, they're doing it. Why can't we do it? You know, we have to find ways to work together because our sources of supply are less than the demand. So we have to somehow find other sources of supply that we currently have, ground and surface water, to match this growth that you anticipate coming here. You can't do it with just those two resources. It will be detrimental, because why do people come here? They're attracted to this valley. It's green. Maybe they don't like the fact the river doesn't flow year round, but there's a reason it doesn't flow year round. But they don't know it, but that's all part of the education of people coming into this valley. They got to know the history like I just shared with you. It just didn't happen overnight. It's taken hundreds of years to get where we are today. But I think what we have today will take us another 100 years. That's my vision.
Because our, water associations, when the subdivision comes into play, the ironclad statement is we have enough water for 50 years, and the question is what is your take on that?
I don't believe so. You can't necessarily totally depend on the groundwater. In the 50s, in the years of 1980 to 2003, farmers abandoned their wells, thinking there was going to be years and years and plenty of surface water. As soon as that drought hit, it's like that Maytag man waiting for the phone call. Every well driller in the valley was racing around to try to refurbish a farmer's groundwater well that he put in the 50s and 60s. And so, yeah, Back then, they called them supplemental wells. The groundwater was supplemental to what? The surface water. Now we're living where the primary water is coming from the ground and the surface water is supplemental. So I don't think you can necessarily depend on the groundwater as your future supply. In fact, El Paso realized that. Their water down there, their groundwater is worse than our groundwater. Ours is great compared to their groundwater when they pump it out of the ground. It's still salty, real salty. In fact, one of the worst wars ever battled, greater than the Civil War and greater than the wars overseas, was right there in El Paso, called the Salt Wars. Everybody wanted salt, and they fought over it viciously. And people forget that. But those salt lakes that they had down there was where they produced the salt that the West and the East needed for flavor. And so I'm just saying that, no, we can't do what we're doing now, in my opinion. We have to find other sources. I would like to see the brackish be the first step in that direction. I think it's prime. It's there, and it's not that bad a quality. But we all are operating in different silos as to how much water we have. So I can't argue with the guy that says, oh, we got 50 million years worth of water underground. I don't know. I wouldn't depend on it.
Mel, I have another question. The other day, we saw a subdivision that, we looked at the picture of the subdivision, and they had major drainage through the subdivision. And the comment came back that they would take care of that we would not have a problem with water drainage and all that. My question is, how is it being taken care of? Are we putting piping in? What's being done, Albert, in these situations where you have drainage through a major piece of property?
Chair, as part of the subdivision review, they do have to submit a grading and drainage plan, but basically all the water that flows through the property has to keep on flowing, and then they're only responsible for retaining water that's created through the infrastructure, such as roads, and once they start building a house, that's basically the water that they're supposed to retain. But any historical flows, they have to keep on going.
So it stays as surface flow?
Yeah.
It's not anything that's piped in or anything like that?
Well, I mean, if they're building like a road over an arroyo, then of course they have to, build culverts or bridges just to maintain the existing flow.
So basically, they're not changing the topography? We're not,
They can change the topography, but then through an engineered analysis, they're supposed to justify how all that water is keeping on going through there, so.
maybe we need to look at piping it.
Well, the problem that I see, not here, everywhere, is that especially in El Paso, I see a situation arising where there's going to be a lot of property damage and loss of lives because the system that the situation that they're in is that they're developing something that's 50 years been dry, 100 years been dry. And where there is the remnant of an arroyo, they're covering it up, piping it, or putting roads, homes near the arroyo bank. And my concern is the right storm event that happened in La Union a couple of years ago is evident of what could happen where the community of La Union is in an arroyo. It's in an arroyo. And so those dams, even if they had held the water and the water went out, the pipes that were designed for it to take the water out, it would have still gotten flooded because the village is in an arroyo. You have to look around the country and find out the same thing is happening here. You're building houses, and yeah, you can design it for pipes and street runoff and everything else, but where does that water go from the street runoff? It's not going to stop there. That's why it's called runoff. It's going to keep going downstream. Where does that downstream street runoff hit? It's going to hit the valley floor. What is in the way of the valley, of that water that hits the valley floor getting to the river? Communities, other subdivisions. There is so much to be said about improving our watershed. And I raised a question a couple of weeks ago at a state event that there's all kinds of money in the state forestry plan for all the devastating fires that were in the northern New Mexico. We don't live in a forest, but a lot of the money goes to protect and prevent fires in the national forests around Santa Fe and the ones that burned up Las Vegas and those areas years. We don't have forest fires here. We have flash floods. Flash floods bring sediment. Sediment plugs streets, plugs drains, plugs pipes, plugs everything. And that water then jumps over that and jumps and jumps, and eventually it breaks, and that's how Hatch flooded. 2 feet of water in Hatch. Almost every house, every business was flooded. That just came by a storm that happened in the Uvas that lasted 3 or 4 days. And in one event on the Placitas Arroyo, that's just a little north of Hatch, that you have to go over that arroyo, 10,000 cubic feet per second came down out of a flash flood. 10,000. The river is lower, somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 CFS. Now you add 10,000 to that, our levees, I don't know if it can hold it. But the point I'm trying to make is we have to plan in the watershed to improve that, as well as plan around your subdivision, of course. That's important, but nobody's taking care of the watershed upstream where it starts. And that's the concern that I always have, because I have to deal with floods, is the fact that what's happening in the watershed. And some of these watersheds you can't get to anymore to fix the watershed. You can't get in there.
On a 100-year flood, have we ever seen one?
Yes. Yeah. They calculated that the La Union flood 2022 was a 200-year event. Okay? We haven't, in my lifespan here with district, have ever seen anything other than over that. But I've seen 100-year storms here. Hatch was equivalent to that. Doña, the one right here off the Doña Mountains, 2008, huge event. El Paso, Donovan, all of that area. Mesa Street becomes a river. And where does Mesa Street end? In the valley floor on Donovan. And the water on Donovan is 4 to 5 feet deep. And it won't move until it gets into the river. And so then around Sunland Park, the racetrack, Ascari, the new recreational park, I've seen it 2 and 3 feet underwater. We were pumping water. EBID was pumping out water out of the State Line restaurant to help that business. I got some ribs out of it, but no. But I'm telling you, it happens. Floods will happen, and we're not ready for them. Nowhere.
it would be difficult to prepare for something like that.
Yes,
It'd be wise to have some sort of storage, if possible.
yeah.
And we've heard the term ancient water aquifers. Can you expound on that?
Ancient water rights
Water
or
aquifers.
ancient water?
Ancient water aquifers.
Yeah. One of the most ancient that I know of is at Sunland Park. And I don't know if anybody in this room knows, but where Mount Cristo Rey is, the Rio Grande went on the west side of Mount Cristo Rey, not through the pass. Asked John Holly, and I'm going, wow. So during those ancient times, prehistoric times, the water collected there because between UTEP and the old Lasarco pipes or the Mount Cristo Rey that pass to the north, underneath what you see as a river flow is a huge geological rift. It's like a rock dam below the surface of the riverbed. So what happens is the Mesilla Valley can't drain because this rock dam that you can't see is right there. So all that water backs up. And that's the ancient water that's been there for years, hundreds of years, because it can't drain. And so a few years ago, El Paso Utilities was trying to put in some stormwater drains to get that water off of Donovan into the river, and they had to dewater the trench continuously to get the water to the river and install those pipes. That water was 30 to 40,000 parts per million TDS. That's pretty ancient. That's pretty salty stuff, but it's still down there. And so when you have massive floods in the Mesilla Valley and El Paso, and it's trying to get to El Paso, the other side, downtown El Paso, through that rift, all that water backs up. It can't take it. And so everything gets flooded. The water table comes up. But you go down right now, and I can tell you that when we have drains dry here, there's drains full of water down there because the water table is so high. All around the racetrack, the El Paso Electric Plant, Sunland Park, the community, the drains are full of water. It's because they can't drain. They can't drain. It's impossible unless you blew up, went underground and blew up that rock formation that's underneath. The other one that's comparable is at Rincon. If you go through the Selden Canyon and you're seeing all that wild river, the same kind of rock formation is right there where the Selden Canyon comes out right by that Temuco Mountain. Again, all the drains back up. But if you go to Hatch, there's no water in the drains. But down there, there's water in the drain. Why? Because it won't drain. And so the water table stays up in the drain. And down there, there's 3,000 acres of farmers down there. So I had to put in solar pumps and pump the water out of the drains into the river to keep the water table down in the drains, to keep the salt off the plants. There's all kinds of different phenomena that's here in this valley, but history shows it too. I'm not making this stuff up, but it's amazing. It's amazing here what goes on as far as the hydraulics of the river and the groundwater interaction.
And the reason I suggested you come and give us a presentation was because so many people, ask you, and I thought, well, this is good public information. Developers, real estate agents, and so forth, I think would profit from this. I mean, not only financially, but for information purposes. I don't know, the other question I have, do we have any alluvial fans up in the Rocky Mountains on the north side?
Where?
Past Oregon, in that direction, alluvial fans that would be able to charge water aquifers in that area?
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities in our watersheds to develop them. You know, there was overgrazing, I can't deny it. But now ranchers can pivot their lots or their units, and they eat, then they move, that one stays idle, and they rotate. There's all kinds of improvements, but we don't look at that. That costs a lot of money. And then you have to deal with the public agent, the federal agencies that manage that stuff. And then you have to deal with the restrictions of the Oregon Mountain Desert Peak. You can't get in there with equipment that needs to be used to improve those watersheds. So there's a lot of things, but I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at those opportunities and try to develop ways that we can maybe harness a little bit of that Rincon water that runs off that makes the water look red down here in the river, or the placitas, or some of these arroyos right here in Las Cruces. You know, I know of areas where there are no flood control dams. And if the 100, 200 year storm hit in those areas, it would be massive flooding because there's nothing to control it upstream. Nothing. And so you just have to deal with what it is. But I think the public awareness is a great way. I think I've never spoken to the realtors. They've never asked me to speak to them. I've talked to Rotary, I've talked to Lions Club, I've talked to different clubs, but I haven't really had the time to do like I did today with you all. I appreciate the questions and the time.
Well, staff, do you have any questions of Gary? That nothing? You, Albert?
No, Mr. Essinger, just thank you for coming in and giving us this presentation.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And you're welcome to keep this presentation.
And I'd like to know if you might be able to let us have your presentation.
It's
So we
yours.
can have it in
Yes,
case
sir.
we need it
Yeah.
for information. And I thank you so much. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Thank you for coming. Appreciate your
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you for taking the time out. I know you're very, very busy, but thank you so much, Gary.
Hell of an education, Gary.
Excuse me?
That was a hell of an education that you had.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Enjoy your retirement, 20 days in counting.
But I have a consulting firm, so I can always come back and help you out.
That's not retirement.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that, our aging eyes.
Item number 5B, recommendation to adopt the amendment. Commissioner Fisher, you had a question?
I have several comments on some items, and I really only got through about the first part. I never even got to the tables because they were so confusing. I apologize. I tried making sense of them, but they're very, very confusing. My only recommendation would be that if we could take this in sections instead of trying to do this whole thing at once, and maybe get some preliminary approvals each time, and then put the amendment up for vote after we're all in a consensus on it. But if you were to present it, if we were to take a part of it, approve it, and then you present the next one, you say, this is what's going to be on the next one, this is why we're doing it, and then give us a chance to look at it at our own leisure and say, okay, well, these are the questions I have for them. then we can present them at the next meeting. I know it's going to take a long time, but trying to go through all this is tough for somebody who doesn't see it every day like you do.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to go over the items that we talked about at the last meeting, and it's in green. That's why I submitted a new printout of the amendments. So if you look, like on the first page, here's the green part. That's what was, we were discussing the last time at the P and Z meeting of the chat questions, or you wanted it to be refined a little bit more. Everything else, we have mostly hatched out at the last meeting, from what I understand. I don't know if you disagree with that or not.
Partially, some of it,
Okay,
there were some areas that you talked about. For example, you have a section on general use standards that when I asked a question, I think Albert's response was that pertained to residential, but general use standards to me does not read just residential. So those were some of the questions I still have. So I don't know if you want me to go item by item, or if you want me just to present my notes to you and you look at it again. Tell me what's more expeditious.
okay. Where do you want to begin?
Pardon?
Where do you want to begin? Where's the sections that you have questions on?
I've got comments on sections through number 12,
Okay,
which was a 320, no,
it's on the
general use standards
Okay.
B. And just, I made some comments on there for you to look at.
Okay,
And I tell you, like I say, I didn't get to the tables because they were very confusing.
right. Okay, we're in the general use standards here.
If you feel you want to address the tables now, well, I don't know, Chairman, what you feel.
Well, I believe that there's a little bit of ambiguity regarding, in other words, simplify things a little bit more for
Right.
interpretation, right?
Well,
And then, sort of like a flow chart, right?
It sometimes feels like we're trying to cover all bases. I know that there's a potential for litigation if we're not real clear on things, but we have to remember that it's a guideline and that we're here to also be, not only serve the community, but also the individual that's coming in for a permit. And that we need to be able to help them through the process and give them some customer service. And the way we've got some of these things written out, it's hard to do your homework before you come in for a permit. It really is.
Yeah, and they usually, when they come in, we explain it to them, because we work with it every day. So we have to extract the information from the customers that are coming in, and then use our regulations, the UDC, as a guide. Well, we have to stand behind the UDC and tell them what they can do and what they cannot do, what they need a special use permit, what they need a zone change for, or a variance, that kind of stuff. So usually we discuss this with the customers that come in, whatever their particular land use that they want to implement.
So these are meant mainly as guidelines for internal administrative use? Is that what I'm hearing?
It's the regulations for the land use and what they can do on their property.
Charlene, be clear, these aren't guidelines.
No,
This is law.
these are laws. Yeah, this is an ordinance. This is a law. These are regulations that we have to go by, and we have to stand by them. And when people come in, this pertains to their property and what they can do and what they cannot do, and what they have to go forward with a special use permit, zone change, variance, or building permits also, and engineering permits and fire code, that kind of stuff. All of that's in here in the ordinance that we have to use to be able to tell the clients what they can do and what they have to do, what regulations they can follow or not follow.
But even as laws, there is ambiguity, there is confusion in how it's written, I guess, what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say.
Chair and Commissioner Fisher, yes, and that is correct. And, you know, part of the attempt here is to kind of clear that ambiguity that's out there. And it's not just because of stuff that we see occurring at the front counter. It's because of cases that we had to take to magistrate court, because, you know, it's input that we're getting back from our code enforcement officers and from judges, you know, and those are kind of the issues that we're trying to clear up and make it more clear in the Unified Development Code. So, I mean, we have changes here that could be aesthetic, you know, because we missed a comma here or a semicolon here, or just to make it more clear. On the matrix, you know, we have changes in there. We're adding uses that we see that are, you know, that are not in there, and we have to, you know, come up with the criteria of where and where they're not allowed. One of the main ones, of course, has to deal with ag, because, you know, before we had that A classification that basically said if your property is assessed as ag, then these are the uses that are allowed on there. So we're trying to, you know, get away from that, because we don't want to base zoning off of how a property is being assessed. You know, we want to make it available by zoning, you know, by land use. So that's one of the major changes, and I think the other ones were like campgrounds and food trucks. So those are the main ones that we're trying to address on the matrix. So
Why don't we do it this way then? All the comments that I have on that first part, let me just give them to you and you give me answers back. Except that I have my notes from the presentation on the back, I'll need them back. And then you can just give me a comment back, and the blues are where my questions are, okay? And some recommendations on some verbiage in the other side. And we move forward with what you have on your tables, if that's okay? Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And then just to be clear, I mean, I think we can proceed, you know, with our original intent of just starting at the beginning. You know, we'll go down the list of amendments, and then, you know, if anything, you know, if there's an item there that's up for discussion, we can talk about it then and there. And then we'll just see how it goes. And if we can address your comments today, then of course, you know, that'll probably be the perfect scenario.
Okay.
And if not, well, then we'll see, you know, what are the next steps.
Okay, well, you have them there in front of you.
Just need to see, I want to see this as a one page. Huh? On view? I don't see it.
Just hit the.
Is that it? Yeah, there it is. Okay, it's going to the first section where we didn't have very many comments on, I can't really see.
That'll be okay, right?
Yeah.
I want to get rid of these comments. Okay, we'll just go like this. You see the view? How did we get out of here?
You can just have Will put the original one back on there.
Where is it, though? Have you taken it? Down here? Yeah. Here, do it.
What do you want back up there?
You want the red lines on, or you want them off?
So just,
I was trying to get the comments off. but-
sure.
Oh,
Just, hey, Will, can you just bring back the original document, please?
I think this is. Okay, it's still,
Yes, that will do the.
okay. We'll start with the first one where there's changes, and it's on the general public hearing. And there wasn't anything on there that we really wanted to change, or it was clarified at the last P and Z meeting.
Yeah, since that last meeting, though, has legal seen this? I mean, are we denying people due process by making them wait for a full year before they can come back?
Well, if they're denied the application, they have to wait it has to come back that they cannot come back with the same case. It has to be something that they've changed. They've cleaned up their property, they've removed stuff. Now they want to go ahead with a special use permit, for example, an accessory dwelling. And there were too many violations on the property, or it was denied at the P and Z meeting. They have a year, they cannot apply for another special use permit for that same purpose for another year. A year has to pass for that.
Yeah, but you're saying particular purpose, but you just told me if there was a violation and they cleaned it up, then they could come back. So you need to, I guess, change the language so that you cover that purpose or compliance with something.
Well, we go case by case basis, and to put it here in the UDC for one particular case would be too obstructive for the general public. So what we do is we deal with it case by case and look and see, and to see what the violations are and work with them with whatever is particular to that case for them to resolve those problems to be able to come back.
Mr. Chair, if I
Okay,
can add
well, I
something.
was misreading particular purpose as particular purpose of use for the land. My mistake.
Teresa, Christine had a comment.
Mr. Chair and members of the commission, I just wanted to add to that. This was language that was in the code previously, prior to the UDC, and for some reason, it just was not incorporated when the UDC was adopted. But it is a standard practice in most zoning ordinances, and the reason for that is to ensure that someone is not trying to submit applications that become burdensome for staff. When an application is denied, typically it's for just cause, it's not compatible with the surrounding area, there are reasons why it's denied. And in order to prevent applicants from just continuing to reapply over and over again, then the year standard is typically in an ordinance. And so that an area has to change, there has to be, they have to be able to show that the area becomes in transition or there are substantial changes that would warrant another application. Otherwise, they do have to wait that year.
Thank you. I'm good.
So on that point right there at 35214, the expiration of land use applications, and that's where you're at. That's what you're discussing. That was your question? Okay. So we took out some of the language that was in there and we added, we cleaned it up a little bit. And we put the application may not be submitted until the code violations are corrected or abated. So do you understand that? Mm-hmm. Okay. The next one is on the permit.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
a quick question regarding that same section in page 6. You mentioned that language was removed. I'm not seeing anything stricken within that
We took
section.
the red line. We took the red lines out. That's what we're trying to get back on.
Oh, they were previously removed. Gotcha. Understood.
Yeah, the red lines are in the packet also. And, well, and you weren't here for the handout, but yes, in the handout, the red lines are there. But if you look on your hard copy in your packet, it'll show what's been, what we've changed or modified in there.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So let's go to the table. And so the green portion on there, there was a question about, scale and intensity. So we have off-site products may be permitted. An SUP is required if not allowed by right. And these are for on-site farm operations, only packaging and warehousing and processing. So the table on campground, we took out, I don't have those red lines that you see. Okay, we took out the T4 and 5 and a special use permit in a D1. So we took out some of the permitted, or the special use permit that we had in other categories. We took those out from our discussion at the last PNC meeting. Let me go on the table. Can I have the Excel sheet up with the table? Because it keeps that frozen lines of the headings. Yes.
Is it open at the bottom?
Okay, I am, okay. So let's start here again. Okay, the big change was on the agricultural and packaging warehousing. And we took out all the A's, of course, and we put P's in T2, T3, T5, and R5, R5L, and D1. You need special use permits in those for packaging and warehousing. On the agricultural processing facility, we took out the A's also, and we need a special use permit. It's permitted in T2, permitted in T5, R5, and R5L, and a special, D1 and D1L, you need a special use permit, and it's also permitted in C1. C2, C3, excuse me, C3 is permitted. We took a special use permit off of there and put it as permitted. Farming and ranching, we put permitted all across the board. Grain storage, it's permitted all across the board except for D1 and D1L, they need a special use permit for that, which are rare in a D1, it's gonna be rare. Livestock pen, a special use permit in D1 and D1L, it's permitted in T2 and T3. The stable and boarding, training is permitted in T2, permitted in R5 and R5L. And that's it for the matrix. Any questions? No? Okay, we're going into the general use standards. And this is the one we added and expanded the most because we added new categories. And number 10, other structures, is the one that we had a lot of discussion on, and we took out all the red lines out of there and just put it on how it's going to read. And,
I gotta put that on the screen.
oh, yes, I am, sorry. Okay, here's other structures. So we took all the red lines off of there so you can read it the way it's supposed to be. And when we took all those red lines out, there was something that was missing. So we added the shall be that's highlighted in green. We added that to connect the whole sentence together so it could read more easily. Do you want me to read it, or you're fine with that? Okay. Outdoor storage, we went through that at the last meeting. And then on the accessory dwellings, we changed the 3,000 square foot allowed, the proposed to 1,800 square feet for an accessory dwelling in T2, R5, R5L, and also T3. And D1, and D1L.
So I'll ask the same question I asked before.
Yes.
Where did that number come from?
We, Albert pulled out the variances that we've had in the last 3 years for size, and it came out to an average of 17 something, so that's where we went to 1,800.
Thank you very much.
I also had a question on that, because, I mean, average square feet for your typical home is about 1,800 square feet.
Yes.
So this is an accessory dwelling, and I just think it's a little too much for an accessory dwelling compared to a regular, your standard residential living area for the homes around the area. But, I mean, that's just my suggestion. It just seems a little bit big for an accessory dwelling, but that's just my point of view.
Yeah, the problem that we're having is that mostly people are wanting to put another mobile home on there. And they're wanting to get bigger mobile homes, like a 16 by 80 or something like that. And that's more than the 1250 that we allow. And so that's why we went up to we're trying to increase it. And also to decrease our workload with the variances that come in for the houses that are over the 1250, and also for the special use permits, to reduce all of that workload that we have coming in because of the restriction of 1250. And to be able to meet the demand of the customers that are coming in for mobile homes that are larger, single-wide larger mobile homes that they're wanting to put on their properties as accessory dwellings. That's the reasoning behind it. And not necessarily for site-built homes, but mostly mobile homes they want to put bigger mobile homes that are single-wide, and they're really restricted to that, so we have to come to the P&Z for the variances. Or if there's, we start them out as an administrative, but if we get any opposition, we have to bring it here. So this is the cases that we do have that we bring to the P&Z. They all began as as administrative approvals. But, with the opposition, we have to bring them here.
So I guess before we move forward, I mean, if there is some concern about the square footage that's being proposed, is there a recommendation right now from the P&Z, just so we can take care of this item before we move forward? And like Charlene stated, I mean, we took the average numbers from variances that we received going back 3 years. Of course, there were some outliers, because one of them was like 2,200 square feet or whatever. But 18, that's the number that we came up with, after we took the average. I think the average was 1,718 square feet, so we just went with 1,800 square feet. That's how we came up with the 1,800. Like Charlene stated, 1250 is what's in the code right now. So is there a recommendation right now from the P&Z?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Casillas, I would suggest 1,500 square feet would be sufficient for the accessory dwelling, since, like I said, the most residential homes are close to 1,800 square feet, so you'd be kind of having two same homes, not the same size, instead of a larger home and a smaller home, which is what I think the UDC is made out to say, well, yeah, you can have another home, but it has to be smaller than the original home. But that's just my suggestion.
Mr. Chair, if I could make a comment. One of the reasons that we wanted to increase the size is because it really didn't, there really was no rationale for limiting the accessory dwelling size. If you're gonna allow an accessory dwelling, there's really no reason why it needs to be limited in size, particularly because there are parcels that are, acreages. And so we're telling people they can only have a 1250 or, even a 1500 seems small now with the size of homes. And so if somebody wants to have a secondary dwelling, it is a full dwelling. There really doesn't seem to be a good reason why we're limiting that size. And so that was the reason why we wanted to increase it, because more and more often people do want to have that secondary dwelling. Mobile homes are economical and they do come in very large sizes now. And so we want to be able to accommodate people who want to have that larger secondary dwelling, particularly if they have a large piece of property where they can accommodate those sizes.
Albert, what was your calculation? 17 what?
1,718 square feet. And I'll give you the numbers. There were about 7 variances that were requested. The smallest one being 1,314 square feet. The highest one being 2,747 square feet, and everything else was in between.
So, I'm sorry, it was 1718?
So the first one was 1,314.
No, your average.
Oh, the average was 1,718 square feet.
18. So why not go with 1,700 square feet?
No, we could have gone both.
I mean,
both ways,
that just seems like if a judge says to you, what's the logic? That's your logic right there.
Yeah.
That's the average. So why not go with it? 1,700 square feet, and that partially addresses his concern.
But if you're trying to accommodate a mobile home, have you looked into the sizes of the mobile homes you have?
Yes.
And is there one that fits in the 1,800?
Well, I haven't looked at that, but most of the people, the customers that come in, they want to have their mother move in close
Right.
to them, that kind of stuff. So we're just trying to make this to accommodate the public that's coming in, and they're wanting this, and it's a demand.
I agree.
That we
but
have
what does
every
that
single day.
cover? What's the size of a mobile home? Does that?
I mean, there's different sizes. I mean, I've seen them as small as 800 square feet. And, the double wides could be a little bit, a little bit bigger than that.
But
But
they're still within the 1,800.
1,800 should be able to cover a normal double wide and for sure a single wide.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with the 18.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I too have no problem with the 18. Quite frankly, as mentioned by staff, we are legislating county land, not city land. These are individuals who often have acres, not lots. They have plenty of room, not all, but most. Just off the top of my head, I can think of at least 2 cases that we had before us that would have been alleviated if we went this route rather than sticking to the current UDC. So I'd be in favor of leaving as is, as written by staff recommendations.
Okay, are we set to go on? So the next one we changed on the mobile home food vendors. We changed the intersection to a roadway, that they'd have to be 20 feet from the roadway. That was a recommendation from our last meeting. Then we're coming into the definitions. So agricultural, packaging, and warehousing, we added for on-site farm operations only. And that was a discussion that we went into extent in the last meeting. And also for agricultural processing facility, we added for on-site farm operations only. And the food handler's card, we put on here the food employees are persons who handle food, utensils, and food contact surfaces. A certificate is required for all food employees who are involved in the preparation, storage, and service of food in a food facility obtained through state and New Mexico Health and Environment Department. Okay, and licensed premises, we added that, and we added ice cream to the carts. And then the yurt, the definition for the yurt. And that's all the changes that we had from the last meeting. So you had in blue here on the administrative and authority.
Let me have it back, and I'll just, some of these you've already answered, so there's no point in going over it again. Yeah, the question was on the one where you had what the county manager, the P&Z shall, and you added submitted in conjunction with preliminary plat. Why did you have to add that, I guess, was my question there. What was the purpose of having to have add that?
Yeah, Chair and Commissioner Fisher. Years before, this commission would see variances to design standards. So for example, if the requirement was a 50-foot right-of-way for a subdivision, and they wanted to do, 30 feet of right-of-way, then they would have to submit a variance. But we through past amendments, we got away from that. Instead of having somebody apply for a variance as part of the submittal for their subdivision, if they want any modifications to be done to the design standards, then they have to state that up front. So we're just making clear that a modification can only be requested with the submittal of a subdivision application. So that way we're not doing two or three steps, just to get something done. Whatever modification, whatever deviation they're trying to do from the design standards, it's already addressed at the subdivision submittal application.
So address it from the beginning,
Yeah.
okay.
And if everything, is supposed to run how it's supposed to run, we've already addressed that. We've already had some, pre-application meetings with the applicant, so it's nothing new. Nobody's being caught off surprise. And for a modification, it comes to the Planning and Zoning Commission with the recommendation from the DRC. So it has to go to the DRC first before it comes to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay. Item number C, the others are okay. Item number C, building permits. Towards the last, you have shall be reviewed in accordance with the currently adopted building code in effect and subsequent amendments thereto. I guess my comment there was leave it at effect, because we can't, if I'm coming in for a permit, I don't know what's going to be passed after my permit application is in process. You can't address everything. So just leave it at effect. What's in effect then is in effect.
So,
Correct?
right.
Am I wrong?
We aren't proposing any changes on that one.
So it stops it in,
We're adding a statement that a
did you
building
remove
permit-
it? Well, then I see that's. Did you remove that? Is that what it was?
No. It would be documented on here.
That's
So what
35210 is what we're looking
yes, it's 35210. And we added a building permit may be refused until compliance of all county codes and ordinances. That's what we added in there. So it's all in black now because that hadn't come up.
Okay, so this
Okay.
has changed from what I had originally received. Okay. Oh, no, see the top part, the top paragraph is, shall be reviewed in accordance with currently adopted building code in effect and subsequent amendments thereto.
Right. And the reason why the building code is in there is because if they want to update the code, then they can do it without coming to the commission to be able to adopt that code, and that's,
I think the question is different.
okay.
I think what she's asking is, if you read this sentence, shall be reviewed in accordance with the currently adopted building code in effect, period.
Period.
Oh,
Why do
okay.
you need the rest of that?
Because that, to me, is like a going round and round, catch-22, and so it's, just leave it in effect, period.
I mean, because the amendments are in effect as well.
They're in effect.
Yeah, but I think and maybe Christina can maybe verify this, but I think it's just talking about the building code itself. Any amendments that occur to the building code, the permit has to comply with. I mean,
No,
Well, then it should be with the currently adopted building code and its effect, and its amendments in effect, something like that, but
she's just trying to simplify the
it's a
language.
wording. The way it's worded, it makes me think that, and whatever else I might want to throw at you in the future, that's how it comes across, okay?
Yes, well, and usually they do, that's, they're open-ended like that, these
Yeah, in a way.
ordinances.
can tell the lawyer
It
wrote
drives
that.
us crazy when they try to pin us
Yeah.
down, believe me, they have come and they've put, and how did this start? We have customers like that
Yeah.
want to know, and yeah, we had one the other day that Janine had to deal with.
Because it does get very complicated. So just add your amendments to the front, in effect, period. That's it.
Okay,
What's in effect is in effect. You got to follow the law.
okay,
Does that make sense?
yes,
so just to be clear, the PNC is just recommending that on that third line where it says shall be reviewed in accordance with the currently adopted building code in effect, period.
With the currently adopted building code and its amendments in effect, word it however you want, but if you want to include amendments in there, make sure they're part of the,
I think,
but really,
Mr. Chair,
building code tells you if you do an amendment, it's still part of the
I
building
think
code.
I think it's fine to leave it at just the code in effect.
Yeah.
Because
the
the
amendments
building
are-
code is actually adopted through a different
Thank you.
section of the code, and it includes the amendments.
Thank you.
Leave it there. Keep it clean. Thank you.
okay.
That's the one item there. 352.14. You have 352 where it says expiration of land use applications and code violations. But it's not set up that way. I mean, are you saying expiration of land use application and expiration of code violations? That's how that sentence read.
Oh, okay, I see,
See what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you would have to read, you have to redo that.
you don't want and code violations in the title, is that what you're saying?
If I understand correctly, she's saying the way it's written,
Oh,
it's about the expiration of code violations and land use app, both of them
Okay.
expiring. That's not what you mean.
no,
No, it's not what you mean, because you should have it split up into two separate, if you want to include that in all under 352.14, what you're looking at doing is expiration of land use applications, and you want to address compliance with existing code violations, or,
so you want us to separate those two?
so you would have A, address your land use application expiration, B, address what you want done on the code violations, that you want them all completed. Any code violation that's been brought forward needs to be taken care of before.
So she actually gave you the answer.
Yeah.
It's expiration of land use applications and compliance with code violations.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
what you want.
okay. My secretary's writing away.
Your secretary's writing it down.
Got it. I'm getting them.
Okay,
Okay, general use standards. General use standards is the one I really have a problem with.
okay,
Page 8, no, you have, page 8, for one thing first, page 8, definition of small, medium, large, and community garden. Do you have that defined? What's a small, medium, or large? You do? Okay, as long as you've got it, because it's kind of arbitrary. And how does that compare with a personal garden? I mean, does that mean that you'll allow community gardens, i.e. what is a community garden versus a personal garden? Question.
we wouldn't regulate personal gardens.
Okay,
And the only reason why the community gardens are in here is because of the community types.
it's because of what?
The community types in Article 4.
Okay. Okay, the general use standards, section B, you have, number 10, you have other structures, and you go into other structures.
Right.
And then you have a section, another paragraph that goes into, in any residential zoning district. And when I asked the question last time about containers and other structures on agricultural land, I was told, well, it only pertains to residential. So is this general use standards only pertaining to residential? Am I misreading this?
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to answer that question. I wasn't here for the discussion, but I was listening to, during the last discussion on this particular item. But I wanted to clarify that there is an interpretation from the Attorney General, the State Attorney General, for building permits on agricultural property. And so when it is in conjunction with the agricultural use and an accessory to the agricultural use, in most cases, building permits are not required, unless there is electrical, for which we do issue permits. But in most cases, they only have to comply with OSHA standards, and there are no inspections that the county would conduct. If they wanted inspections, then they typically would have to get a third party to do their inspections for those agricultural buildings. But that is something that that has come up, particularly most recently during the cultivation season. And so we did get that interpretation from the state. It was actually issued several decades ago, and it has not been updated, but we continue to follow it. So if you're not on agricultural property, then yes, and you're in the unincorporated area, you will have to get permits for agricultural uses that are on the agricultural site. In most cases, no. It would be, best to ask just to make sure that you're not in a gray area, but that is the interpretation and that is what we're following.
Okay. I'm sorry, gentlemen, that I'm holding this up. Just, I guess that was mainly it, and that general use thing in that area was all for outdoor, outside and outdoor storage, again, was the same question, but you've answered that it does not apply for the agricultural side. Thank you.
Is that, do you have any more?
I think I'm okay with that.
You're okay? Okay. Anyone else?
Charlotte, first of all, you're doing a great job.
Yes.
But where does this actually, these two chapters, 502 and 504, where do those actually sit in the ordinance?
It's under,
Physically, where do they sit? Because is it just, it doesn't come right before the glossary, does it? No.
No, Chair and Commissioner Zarnig, they're under Article 5, under zoning districts and requirements.
Are they at the front?
They're, so on the front, we have the zoning districts, a description of what each zoning district is. We have the land use matrix, and then they're after the land use matrix.
So here's the question I have. If these apply to every zone, shouldn't these be at the front? I mean, if I'm a guy reading this, I'm gonna go right to the zone that I want. If this isn't in a place where I can find it easily, I'm gonna miss these.
Yeah, I think the intent, well, the way it's laid out, first we have the zoning districts and the land use matrix, because a lot of the questions is, well, can I put a mobile home on here? Or can I build this, or can I do a laundromat on this property? So being at the front, we can just right away point out, yes, this use is allowed. And then when it comes to accessory buildings and pools and, the other uses that are there, I think it makes sense that they're after well, at least for us, after the land use matrix.
Yeah.
But they're still under Article 5. The glossary is way at the end.
No, I understand the glossary. I'm okay with the glossary. It's just these, if it says, I can't remember what it says, regulations general to all zones. That's every zone is affected by this chapter. Why would you bury that? That doesn't make any sense.
But they're
it's-
telling you
and
it
it's-
doesn't apply to all zones. It doesn't apply to agricultural.
Oh,
That's what I just heard on the storage unit. So that's our confusion, okay? If it's going to be residential or applying to zones, blah, 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 this is the general use.
That's why we go on a case-by-case basis. When the customer comes in, they tell us where their property is, we need to see how it's zoned, and then whatever they want to do on the property, then we advise them according to what the UDC says, what they can do. Does it answer the question?
So general use
does this
standards may
not
be
apply to
applied.
ag zones?
Yes. Pardon?
Does this not apply to ag zones?
Well, it's the building permits that, like I said, there's a lot of exceptions for agricultural uses, both land use and permitting, which were determined by case law. And though we don't necessarily write that in there, but we know what the standing is and what the interpretations are from the state. And so in some cases for agricultural, it won't apply because of that interpretation. So when it comes to agricultural land uses and buildings, then it really is a case-by-case basis, and we have to be looking at, what they're using it for, and if it truly is an agricultural use and building, and if those exceptions apply. But in all other cases, then it's pretty straightforward. You look at the matrix, you look at the additional standards that are there. And you're right, if it's going to apply to all uses, maybe we should put it first, but then we would really struggle to prioritize what to put first in the ordinance, because almost everything is going to apply at some point if you're looking at it. And so the way it's structured, we have the land use definitions first, or the zoning districts first, and then the standards, and then, whatever comes next.
I just want to make sure this isn't a gotcha. That somebody looks at the use zone, they follow those standards, and then one of the planning staff says, oh, wait, we've got to look at 350-502. And the person goes, 350-502, what's that got to do with it? I looked at the use zone, and you go, no, I'm sorry, this is a chapter that applies to every zone. Well, it just doesn't seem in the right spot, unless it's in the front, because it applies to everything.
But
You think about it, see if it makes sense to you.
But I don't think it applies to everybody. I think, that's why I say I argue with that general statement, general use. General use, but you need to identify where it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply in agriculture, and you just state as fact, with the exception of. Does it apply in urban areas, with the exception of? You need to really look at that one, because that's too general a statement. Okay, it needs to be, where does it apply? Does it apply on all residentials, all T1, C2s, all what? And be very specific on that. And I know what you're trying to get at, and I understand what we're trying to do, and it's a good thing. But you're also impacting a lot of areas that do not fall under that.
Take a look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, am I being too difficult? I'm sorry.
I don't
No.
think, no.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Fisher, this section is specific to group homes, travel trailers, garage sales, commercial vehicle parking, adult bookstores, and it goes into detail
Okay,
in that section for that particular use you're looking at.
so it's in that section. That's what we were asking. Where is it located?
Yeah. So I think each section regarding the travel trailers addresses those development standards
Okay,
for a travel trailer or the shipping container.
okay.
Does that make sense, Commissioner Zerniak? Yes,
Yeah.
okay. It's kind of a catch-all section for specific uses.
Okay.
We have to do this every day with customers, and the best example that people call all the time, how many animals can I have on my property? That kind of, and there's a specific section that we go to, and we send that to them so they can see where it's at. And it isn't addressed in the matrix. It's in the ordinance.
Thank you.
So what do we do with this?
So now,
We make the changes and come back.
Okay.
I mean, if we're all in concurrence with, and we've been taking notes of all the, all the changes that the PNC has requested, I think we're at a point where we can just, probably give a conditional or a recommendation of approval to the Board of County Commissioners as long as the changes are made, of what was talked about today. We do have members of the public here that might want to address on some of the issues, but other than that, I think we're ready to move forward.
Not yet. Have you noticed let the commission work this out? Free flow, right? Okay.
So I don't know if we want to open it up to the public, see if anybody wants to come up here and talk, and
So we're gonna amend it now? No. All right. Okay, we're gonna open it up to the public. Any comments from the public? For or against? Nobody signed up? All right, closing it to the gallery. Commissioners? I have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna wait.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, on item number 5B, any comments, commissioners? Additional comments? No? Okay, the chair entertains a motion. Well, let's postpone it.
We
to the
had,
next
we had
session.
change, we had changes today.
Because I had some more
So that
questions,
means
but,
that we could table this to the next meeting and
All
then
right.
do it bring it back with the changes that we discussed today.
so we're not ready to vote on it yet. Okay,
so
I'll move we table this till the next meeting.
and I'll contact you, Albert, on some other questions I had. All right.
okay, and then okay, so I'll plead my case, I guess, once more. I mean, like I said it before, I mean, Janine's been taking notes. We know what the changes were minor, some minor corrections that had to be made. I think it would be staff would propose that the commission moves forward with a positive recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, with the condition that we just make the changes that were discussed today.
Okay.
In addition to that, we have customers that are waiting for these amendments to go through. They're calling and asking if they've gone through, and because we've been working on them for a while.
Well, I'll move to adopt Amendment 6 to the Unified Development Code. To make it's a recommendation
Right.
to the
It's a
county
recommendation to the Board
commissioners.
of County Commissioners. And keep in mind, if that is the will of the board today, we still have to go before the board to request permission to publish general title and summary. And then, we have to advertise for like 2 consecutive weeks for that if we get permission, and then schedule the Board of County Commissioners hearing later on. So we still so step number 1, ask for permission to publish, and then step number 2 is to actually have the actual hearing with the board.
And then after that, it's after the board, the county commissioners adopts it, it's 60 days. After that, it goes in 30 days. 30 days after that, it goes into effect.
So
so we're really just the first step.
So we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Zerniak to accept this amendment.
Mel, say
I'll
what-
second it
Okay.
But to accept the amendment with the recommendations made today.
with the recommendations today, right?
I'd like to have a clean slate as to what we're gonna be voting on. I mean, there's still some questions that, that haven't been answered. When we send it over to the Board of County Commissioners, I'd like to have a clean slate. This is what it is, right?
I mean, and that's why we're here today. I mean, Commissioner Fisher brought up her concerns. If there are other concerns, I mean, we're here to entertain them.
So Commissioner, are you clear? I mean, it's your call.
I understand what's going on with this. I'm clear with it. We have a motion
Well, we have a motion on the floor.
to accept it, and I've seconded it.
Alejandro,
I'm okay.
you're okay?
Forward.
He's okay.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor, second, right?
seconded
Any
it.
discussion on the motion?
I seconded the
All right,
motion. I
no
seconded Bob's
discussion on the motion? Commissioner Fisher? No?
Do we have a second? or-
Oh, we have a
yes,
second,
Yes,
yeah.
we do. We already have a second, so
We
we're-
already have a second. So you ready to vote?
yeah.
All right, okay, roll call.
Roll call.
Commissioner Odanga,
Yes.
Commissioner Zargis,
Yes,
Commissioner Lear,
Yes.
Commissioner Jimenez,
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher,
Yes,
Vice Chair Zerniak,
Absolutely.
Chair Acosta.
Yes. Okay. I hear a
And
little
just to be
voice over
clear,
there. Thank
we
you.
are
All
moving
right.
forward with the 1,800. There was a solid consensus on that. Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
All right.
Thank you.
Janine, item number 6.
Mr. Chair, we do not have any administrative approvals to report. We're doing a software conversion, so our data really hasn't been up to date, so we haven't been able to formalize any monthly reports.
All right. Staff input?
Chair, early voting started. We do have one of the rooms over there available for early voting, so you guys are here now, so.
All right.
Yes, and we just wanted to thank you for moving the amendments forward. We appreciate that, because it is a lengthy process.
Commission input. I'd like to say I'd like to thank staff for having Gary come forward and give us a little bit of what goes on water reclamation, water usage. And I would like to continue this effort of getting more information regarding water resources, all right? There was a lot of information I didn't know, and at first I was beginning to wonder, are we running out of water, but apparently we have other resources available to us, unbeknown to us, to me anyway. So thank you so much for helping us out. Thank you. Item number 9.
has his hand up for a comment, I think. No, the gentleman has.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you back there.
I just have a comment for the end when you guys are ready to wrap up.
We're about ready to wrap up.
We're ready. Here. Okay.
I think item 9's adjournment.
If you don't mind. I'm Kevin Lutz. I've been here before. Just one comment that I would have is, in general, I've been to a lot of these meetings, and although that presentation this morning was great, I learned a whole lot, but I spent 2.5 hours waiting here to hear you guys actually get to the amendment. So going forward, if possible, I would like to recommend that you guys take care of business first, then do those types of presentations later on in the day, because a lot of us, I don't know about these guys, but a lot of us have jobs, we have things to do, and again, it was a very interesting presentation. I learned a heck of a lot about the aquifers and how all that stuff's done, but it would be nice to get the business done first. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Item number 9, Commissioners.
Mr. Chair, I move adjournment.
I'll second that.
All right, item number 9.
We got a motion to adjourn, and I seconded it.
Who seconded?
I did.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor, it's been second. Any discussion on the motion?
Cheeseburger time.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, the ayes have it. Thank you very much.